Welcome to my outdoor kitchen in Bali. I've been here for 3 months and I'm about to go back to the UK. And I thought before I go back, I want to take you through my setup and explain how the audio works, explain how the Midi works, and also a little bit about how I like to put music together and what I want to do live to keep it fun and exciting for me, as well as having a connection with the audience. So, I'm just going to ramble on, warning. I'm not going to do any editing. I'm just going to include everything I talk about. This is my first take and my only take, so enjoy. So what I think I might do first is just talk about audio routing and how all that works, and we'll go from there. So the main output, let's go backwards, to a sound system or mixing desk next to a DJ, is actually coming from the loop station. That is the final out. And working backwards, I have then this mixer which mixes most of the gear in here, well, all of the gear in here, which is the Blue Box 1010. After that, the audio that's also going into the loop station, separate from this, is a microphone and also a trumpet with its internal microphone, which is like a mute, so it's great for doing things when you're in a hotel room, as well as potentially feedback. I don't know yet. And that goes into the second XLR. And then I've also got an acoustic guitar over here. Here it is. So that's jacked in, and it's one of these pretty cool Taylor Minis. I've had it for years, GS Minis, and it's got a little pickup in there, which is it's pretty good. It does the job. And finally, I've got the Nord drum, and that's going just the last instrument input. So they're both mono, and they create some different flavors, a bit more human, and yeah. So that's the audio, sort of routing. Going into a bit more detail with how the audio works, I use this mixer as just one setting. So it's just one preset, and from there I've got delay and reverb. But apart from that, all the levels are structured exactly the same. So the gain structuring is exactly the same in this for every track. So what I do then is, when I save presets that I've made in the Nymphs and the Tofun and the Minitor, I save the levels there. And same with the black box, which is my drums. I get the levels correct here, because also, apart from the kick, most of the drum sounds are going through my Deco Strymon to create a bit of saturation and compression. And what I've done, I've got that on full with the volume roughly half-ish. I've got a little bit of permanent marker to keep my knobs in the right place. So then what I do is I mix into that saturation. So if I want more, then I push the sound into it more. And again, I set the levels either with the velocity in the sequencer, or I mix in here a little bit to get fine tune the levels, maybe with a little bit of sound and that effects potentially, so that's delay and reverb. So this has got 3 separate outputs, so I'm using one of the mono outputs for the kick, and that goes directly into here, so that's my channel 1, and then channel 2 is actually my bass, and that's again mono, and then the rest of the drums go through here, which is channel 3, just mono, and then I've actually got another channel coming out from here, which is when I want to do samples where I'm cutting up a vocal part, or cutting up some Balinese instruments or anything else I've been sampling, but I want to turn it into more of an instrument, so I've got a separate channel for that. So I've got a bit more control over that sound. So that's a separate channel again, so that's channel 4. And then after that, I've got the Typhon. Now that's in stereo, because it's got some stereo effects which I like to use, and that's coming out to one of the channels on the Blue Box. And then I've got the Nymphs, which is a polysynth, and that's mono. And after that, I've got the O Coast, which again is a mono interesting semi-modular, awesome synth I'm really enjoying. And finally, but absolutely not least, which I'm only just getting into a bit more detail in terms of making my own patches, is the Empress Zoya. And that I'm using this at the moment primarily for effects. So like delays and reverbs and interesting things like phases and stuff like that, and you can make your own thing from the many modules, which is really interesting, but also it can be a synthesizer, and yeah, I haven't really, and also like bit crusher and overdrive and all sorts of interesting stuff you can do with it, and there's a whole community out there making patches, and yeah, some really creative people out there making patches, which is awesome to play around with. So that's the 8 channels on the blue box. So I say 8 channels. It's got 6 stereo channels, and I make up 8 channels. So some are mono, and some are stereo from that. So the Zoe again is stereo. So a stereo output from the blue box goes into the Boss loop station. So what I like to do then is I've actually got on the performance side on the input a bank just for the input of what all this is doing, and so I can filter it up quickly and select different things like that, as well as doing all the looping and things like that. So yeah, when it comes to the other bits of audio, I've obviously got the microphone, and it's got a little bit of compression on it, obviously a bit of low cut. I think I might have taken a little bit of 200 out as well on this microphone, and then I've got the trumpet. Now this microphone in here is just a silent brass mute, and it's cool for practicing. It doesn't sound great on its own. Normally it goes with a preamp which has got some sort of crazy EQ curve on it, I think. So I've tried to EQ it as much as I can with the loop station to make it sound more like a trumpet just going through a microphone. But for me, when I'm writing music and putting music together, it's actually a really great alternative, because the trumpet is so loud, and everything else here is relatively quiet, including the guitar. That's relatively quiet compared to when playing the trumpet out loud. So that silent brass mute is amazing, because it really takes the level down. And so yeah, I'm using that as a mic, and that's going into, actually it can't go straight in, so anyone who's watching this and using a silent brass and wants to do this, you actually need one of these. This is a Rode VXLR Pro. And what that does, it uses the phantom power to turn it down to 5.5 volts, I think, which then powers the electret condenser microphone in the trumpet. So top tip there, if you want to just use the microphone and the trumpet but not the preamp, which apparently, and I haven't got one, is a bit noisy. Okay, so then I've talked about how I've got the stereo input, instrument 1 and 2 from the blue box, and then we've got 2 other instruments, which is the guitar, I've talked about that, and the normal drum, which is really good fun, synthesizer for percussion elements, as well as actually just tones and all sorts of crazy stuff. You can really mess around with that. So that is the audio. Okay, so MIDI. Now all the MIDI comes from this awesome piece of kit, which is the Squarp Instruments Hapax. Some of you may have one now, and I've had it for a while. I had the Pyramid before then, and when this came out, my friend said, "Oi, Tom, check this out." And I was like, "No, that's doing everything you can ever wish for and more." One of the great things about this is that I can have a whole project running, and then I can load up another project separately, and then I can mix the 2 MIDI projects together, so I can seamlessly, well, hopefully seamlessly, go from one track to the next. It's slight of blowing my mind still, and even though I've had it a while, I'm still not like 100% on how to do that really well. So if anyone is really good at that, please get in touch and show me. I'm practicing, but it's still early days for that section of the transitions. So yeah, what I've done here is on the Hapax, I've got a bunch of MIDI channels and controlling various things. So if I just take you through how I do it, I've got on channel 1, which is 8 pads of drums. So kick is at the bottom, and then you've got this, I like doing like snare, clap, or snare, second sort of snarey thing, and then a clap, and then the more brighter stuff like hi-hats, open hi-hats, cymbals, tambourines, that sort of thing. That's all sort of programmed in, and that goes for the first 8 pads on the black box. So as I said, the kick is a separate audio signal into here, but in here it's just part of the drum programming for my first channel. I do actually have 2 other MIDI channels which control the black box, which is channel 3 and channel 4, and they are for the more percussive elements, so I can sort of split up the things, or maybe if I've created some interesting loops with other instruments, then I might want to trigger those from here, as well as also another MIDI channel just to control one patch, one of the 16 pads in here, which could be an instrument, which is more like broken up in samples and that sort of thing. Hello. Hello. Salamat, sorry. So once I've done the drums, then I'm moving on to all the other instruments. So this is where we get interesting because, well, I've done the drums. Everything's interesting. Onto the Typhon next, and so that's obviously a MIDI channel on its own, and then Nymphares, which is a MIDI channel on its own. Now, because this is polyphonic, I can use the interesting chord machine in this Hapax, which is really powerful and really interesting stuff you may not dream up when you're playing keyboard. So it's another way of inputting your MIDI. I also use a MIDI keyboard for doing stuff as well. It's got MPE on this for an MPE controller, and then I've got the O-Coast, which is another channel, MIDI channel, but this time instead of it being MIDI, it's actually CV gate, so I'm controlling with voltages, and that makes it a little bit more interesting. And also this synthesizer is I'm constantly playing with the tuning. I try and have a standard tuning setup, so when I'm starting a track, it's not really far out. I normally have the pitch up and the fine tune down. That gives me a basic starting point, and then you can fine tune from there if I need to. After that, I've got the Zoia, which I'm controlling from here, so obviously it can be synthesizers, or it can be just saying what patch I've set up on here and doing a program change. And then after that, I've got the, what is it? I can't even remember. 9. MIDI channel 9. Where is it? Oh yeah, loop station. So this will tell the loop station, right, I'm using another patch, because on these I set up patches per track. I'm playing, the reason being that I might want different effects on the input. Mainly that's why, and also I might want something different on the output. I may even have like 1 or 2 loops pre-made in here from playing guitar or trumpet, which I can add to my live elements as I go, because sometimes I've done something which is like, yeah, that's really cool, and I could just use that alongside my other live elements. And then number 10 is telling the blue box what to do, but I've decided actually I'm not going to do any patch changing in terms of presets. In fact, you can't even do it with MIDI at the moment. But what I do with this is I use the automation on this to duck down the bass with the kick, so I can automate ducking the bass from here via MIDI. It works all right. There's a little bit of noise in there. The way the gain or the volume, depending on which you use, they have slightly different noises, but overall when the mix is going, it doesn't make a difference to the sound overall. And then after that, I think that is everything, isn't it? Yeah, got it all. Cool. So that's the MIDI side. And now, interestingly, some of the MIDI connections are normal MIDI cables, other ones are the mini 3.5mm jacks, and some of the machines like things in different ways. The TRS connections are very slightly different to other ones, so I've had a bit of a fiddle around, and it's all working great now. Yeah, I think that's everything. So apart from that, power-wise, these machines here use USB power, so I've got separate sockets for the USB power, so they've got enough current so they work properly, and then obviously I've got a bunch of other power supplies, so I'm using like 10 sockets I think in total, and I keep the mains cabling in a bag now when I'm traveling, when I'm traveling, and then all the adapters and all the cables go in here. So this flight case at the moment has got its lid off. It's an awesome case. I can't remember who it was made by. It's on the lid somewhere. Can't see it. Oh yeah, Nan UK, NANUK. It's actually a gun case, I think, but this is a great size. What it's done is stop me from putting massive machines in there and being too heavy. It's roughly about 21 kilograms in total, which is much better than my last setup, which I've still got all the gear and stuff, and I'm definitely going to use it, but carting that around, it was more like 32 kilograms. So yeah, that was a bit much. So yeah, I mean, overall what I'm doing here, so this is going on to creating. My idea is to have electronic elements with some human live elements that I put in, and turn that into a performance through mixing the different synths and arranging them live. So yeah, one of the fundamental things to do with this, instead of having like a song mode or a bunch of loads of patterns made up, maybe I might have 2 or 3 sections, but what I like to do is basically have all the ideas running and I mute them, and then I decide as and when I want them in and how I'm going to bring them in. So I create an arrangement live. So my arrangement's always going to be different. It means I can really connect with the audience and what they're feeling. I can bring things in slower or faster, and yeah, really sort of read that connection through arrangement. And when it comes to mixing, the levels are set. Once I've got the mix right in my headphones, and I check them on other sound systems as well. Once they are set, I bring them in using either the volume controls on the synthesizers or just do a straight up mute. So then I at least know when I'm mixing the different instruments in that I'm not overbearing on one sound, or the bass is not too big or whatever. So that's how I sort of go about making this live, is that I'm constantly changing my arrangement, and I'm coming up with ideas that I may have practiced or pre-planned on the instruments, but also you can just do what you want. And I think one of the ideas is to not try and do anything that is too rigid. Just keep it free and allow ideas to come. If they come, just do it. And that's what this setup allows, is just like, I'm just going to put that in there. I can hear something, let's do it. And that can happen in a live situation or in the studio, and that's the sort of creative process really. So yeah, and the other great thing actually about this setup, so far I've been jamming with other artists, producers here, coming up with some ideas together, and it's really quick to put things together. And yeah, it's sort of stepping away from the computer and fiddling around with things and having this different approach. I find it's meditative, it's exciting, and yeah, really enjoying it. So that's me in a nutshell. Any more questions? I could always do an in-depth video on a synthesizer or a mixer or how I actually do certain things. Oh, and one more thing is actually I've been sampling noises. So one of my other things to do is sample like stuff. So whether it's like, I don't know, the cicadas at night or waterfalls or whatever, and then turn them into sound effects. So like, I've got my noise sweeps are all waterfalls, for example, and then like bashing bits of metal and wood and walls and gates and doors and whatever. Some of those things I've been like crushing up and making my little sample packs and then putting them into the black box, because there doesn't have much processing in there. So I do processing in the computer first and cut them up to make life easy when it comes to here. But sometimes I like to have like just a long recording of random things I've hit, and that can just go in the black box, and then I can set it all out on the keyboard and then randomly trigger stuff. So that's another way of doing things too. So yeah, I think I've rambled on enough. I'd love to know what you think about this video. I'm interested in making videos to help you guys out there that are interested in synthesis and sampling. So if you have any requests, please let me know and I will do it. To be honest, I like talking in the microphone and chatting about music. So yeah, more than happy to do that. So don't forget to subscribe if you've got this far. Press that subscribe button. And I will send another video out at some point. Okay, cool. Take care.